Jesus' disciple John, who wrote the fourth biography of Jesus' life, also wrote the last book of the Bible. And we're going to read from Revelation chapter 1, verses 8 down to verse 18. So John, who met the risen Jesus, then had this vision of the living Jesus when he was on a prison island called Patmos, imprisoned for being one of Jesus' disciples. And he writes, I, John, your brother and companion in the suffering and kingdom and patient endurance that are ours in Jesus, was on the island of Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. On the Lord's day, I was in the Spirit, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet, which said, write on a scroll what you see, and send it to the seven churches, to Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me, and when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And among the lampstands were someone like a son of man, dressed in a robe reaching down to his feet, and with a golden sash around his chest. The hair on his head was white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like blazing fire. His feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand he held the 7 stars, and coming out of his mouth was a sharp, double-edged sword. His face was like the sun, shining in all its brilliance. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Then he placed his right hand on me and said, don't be afraid. I'm the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. There is something about holding keys that is quite empowering, isn't there? When you get the keys to your first ever house, it suddenly becomes very real, doesn't it? Or when you get the keys to a new car, you get a little bit of a wee buzz. A lot of people will pose for the key photo, post it on the socials. Kobe, guaranteed you did that when you got your new car, did you? Lies, 100%. But keys and who holds them it's a significant thing. It's why when the wrong person holds the keys, it's terrifying. We only have one car key left. Someone, Sarah, lost the other car key at the first ever weekend away in Arbroath. It's memorable for that reason. But it means when we see our 3-year-old Keenan playing with our last remaining car key, it gets whipped out of his hand straight away. Why? Because when keys are in the wrong hands, it's terrifying. It does make you wonder, when did it become a legitimate plot twist in a movie that the keys to a prison cell are attached to the collar of a dog? Stupid idea, isn't it? Because keys and who holds them is significant. And all I want to do this morning is focus on one verse that we read and to show you that what unlocks Easter is the keys that the risen Jesus is holding in his hands. If you've got a Bible, or maybe we could get it on the screen again, Revelation chapter 1, verse 18, Jesus says, I'm the living one. I was dead, and now look, I'm alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. So I want us to ask 2 questions of that one verse. Question number 1, what are the keys for? Question number 2, in whose hands are the keys? All right? That's all we're going to ask. Question 1, what are these keys for? The first answer says death. If you're like a newcomer at GCC, it's worthwhile you knowing that we have 3 lads in our congregation who work for a funeral director's company. That means that if you don't get out here alive this morning, we've got you sorted. It's a service we can provide between Chico, Darren, and Jordan. We can get you buried pronto. Not in a kind of ominous way, just in an efficient way. They're quite good at their jobs. But it is a sobering reality that one day each and every single one of us will need to employ their services. That at the end of life is a door that gets locked behind us. But I don't know if you noticed, it doesn't just say that Jesus has a key, it says that Jesus has keys. Not just a key to death, but keys to death and. My guess is a few of us in the room probably think that it's death, then nothing. It's just you die. But with that word and, Jesus is pushing you to realize that there is death and something. He calls it death and Hades. That picture is of a holding cell for hell. Again, he's pushing you to realize that one day after death, you have a date booked where you will face to face come before a just judge. We read what happened to John when he met that judge face to face. He fell down on his face as though dead. And the point for you and me is that death and Hades locks you up in a prison of fear. Or at least it ought to. That one day we will get to a point where all of our life, every thought, every word, every decision, every action, every motivation, every wasted second will be brought before the judge who perfectly sees all things and so will perfectly judge all things. When someone dies, we are very quick to post RIP, rest in peace. But Jesus would like to give new words to those letters and say, actually, RIP ought to stand for remanded in prison. Death and Hades. That every single one of us will be locked up after death, awaiting that day of judgment that rightfully ought to banish us to hell. Death and Hades. What's good is it says there are keys. The important question is, who holds the keys? Because this shows us you don't just need someone who can direct your funeral. You need someone who will deliver you from this forever. You don't just need someone who's got the keys to the doors of a hearse. You desperately need someone who's got the keys to deliver you from hell. So, question number 2, in whose hands are these keys? And it says, someone called the living one. Or actually more than that, someone who can say, I was dead, but look, now I am alive. The good news is these keys aren't in the hands of a 3-year-old toddler. These keys are not round the neck of a collar of a prison dog. These keys are in the hands of someone who was dead and is now alive. Did you notice the repetition of that word and? You've already had death and Hades, but the keys of the one who has keys to death and Hades are the hands of one who can say, I was dead and I am alive again. The keys to death and Hades are in the hands of someone who has smashed through death and Hades and presented an escape route to death, then life. In Revelation, as we read it, John has already been presented with this just judge and a picture of him where you're not meant to understand every detail, you're just meant to be overwhelmed by all the details. He's glorious like the sun. But John is saying that just judge on Good Friday becomes remanded in prison from my charges. That willingly, lovingly, powerfully, for me, the just judge suffers death and Hades to set me free from the fear of them. And on Easter Sunday, the one who had been remanded in death and Hades gets to the point where he can say, I was dead, and look, I'm alive forever and ever. And I hold the keys to death and Hades. He's saying to you that death is no longer a locked door. Hell is no longer a locked door. And the socials post of Easter Sunday is not you with car keys in front of your new car or you with house keys in front of a new house, but Jesus holding the keys of death and Hades in front of an empty tomb. And the words he says to John are, do not be afraid. Scared of dying? What's beautiful is this massive moment from this glorious Jesus is applied very personally to the circumstances that John found himself in. Here is John, having been convicted and evicted to a prison island for following Jesus. And yet the risen Jesus, with hands that held the stars' constellations in place, but the same hands that had the scars of crucifixion, come and place his hand on John's shoulder and says to him, John, don't be afraid. I hold the keys of death and Hades. Which actually means the third question we need to ask you is a much more personal one. We've asked, what are the keys for and whose hands are the keys in? The third question we need to ask is, has the holder of the keys set you free from what's holding you prisoner? Can you answer that? Has the holder of the keys set you free from what's holding you prisoner? You need to get this morning. We are not remembering Jesus' resurrection this morning. That is not what's going on. We are meeting a risen Jesus. There's a difference. It's not just that he rose, it's that he is alive. And he still meets people. He still opens prison doors for people. He still puts his right hand on people and says, don't be afraid. And maybe you need to hear him say to you this morning, when your fears are making your mental health feel like a prison cell, don't be afraid. I hold the keys of death and Hades. Maybe he's saying to you today, when your cancer makes you feel like hospital has become a jail, he says to you, don't be afraid. I hold the keys of death and Hades. He says to you, when you feel like your addictions have made our scheme feel like they are holding you with unbreakable chains, he puts his hand on you, he says, don't be afraid. I hold the keys of death and Hades. Maybe as you get older, your old age is making you feel like your body has all the anxieties of death row. He puts his hand on you and he says, don't be afraid. I hold the keys of death and Hades. Maybe most importantly, when you, in your conscience, are convicted of all of the things that would condemn you to hell, Jesus takes his scarred hands and he places them on you and says, do not be afraid. I hold the keys of death and Hades. He holds keys that destroy fear. The question that you need to answer this morning is, are you holding on to him by faith?